So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, December the 3rd, and this is episode number 136 of Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers. This is the way to be. And I'm Frederick Dunn. I'm super glad that you're here, and thank you to all of you who submitted your questions over the past week. If you want to know what we're going to talk about today, please look down in the video description below and you see what's going on, item by item, question by question, and also some links and additional information as needed. What else do we need to know today? If you need to talk to somebody right now, because maybe you're not watching immediately, obviously, because it's not a live stream, although there will be live streams coming up, and you have to pay attention to get those announcements so you'll know when that's going to happen. But let's say you're watching this and you want to talk to people about beekeeping, and you just happen to have a Facebook page. So you've got access to Facebook. There's a fellowship there. It's called The Way to Bee, and it's a group. So if you do a Google search, Facebook, The Way to Bee group, you'll find it. If you're a nice person, they'll let you in. And then you can meet people all over the world, backyard beekeepers just like yourself, full of ideas and innovations and adaptations and ways to keep bees specific maybe to the area where you're living. Because I'm here in the state of Pennsylvania, the northeastern part of the United States, and of course, the weather has gone bad. It's 34 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which is 1 degree Celsius. And the other thing is, there's something called analytics on YouTube, by the way. And when you look at that, you see how many people that are watching you are subscribers. Did you know that 80% of my viewers are not even subscribers? So here's what I do. I invite you to subscribe right now. And here's the reason some people can't subscribe. They just watch YouTube. They don't have a YouTube channel. If you don't make a YouTube account, guess what you're losing out on? The ability to create playlists of your favorite YouTube videos, no matter which video channel, YouTube channel, whoever you're watching. If there are things that you want to see later, or playlists, for example, like this one, Beekeeping Questions and Answers. If you have a YouTube account, then you can create playlists and you can pick them and you can add the videos that you like the most to your playlist. See how easy that is? Because when I'm giving a talk about bees and bee equipment and things like that, I always say, when people say they watch the YouTube, I say, oh, do you have a YouTube channel? What's your name? Maybe I know you on there. Oh, no, I don't have a YouTube channel. So there are benefits to having a YouTube account. It's not because you have to put out videos, but it helps you track others. Anyway, I've covered that pretty good. And so join a group, talk to anybody anytime you want. It's cold, it's wet. First week of December, by the way. So this is the holiday season in full swing. And I think that's it. I'm just going to move right into it. Questions and answers. The very first question for this week is from Michael Morningstar, Valparaiso, Indiana. My question during your video was, I'm pretty new to beekeeping. I have 3 hives. I caught swarming, and I want to purchase a queen and a bundle of bees. Can I start them in an 8 or 10 frame regular hive? And by regular hive, we're probably talking Langstroth, and we're also talking a deep box. Do I need to purchase a small, like 5 frame nuke? Nuke is short for nucleus colony, smaller colony, that's it. Okay, so I've always said, and this is the fun of learning about bees for a long period of time, and of course, the fun for you is having multiple mentors in beekeeping who can give you multiple perspectives on how to keep bees exactly where you live. So I think it's a great idea. Because here's what I did. I've evolved through the years keeping bees. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Anyway, some people evolve slower than others. So I never wanted a bunch of different beekeeping equipment in my bee yard. So I started, like many do, it's the most popular beekeeping setup in the world, basically, is the Langstroth beehive setup, and it comes in 8 or 10 frame boxes. So I went with Langstroth 8s in the beginning, and then I expanded to the 10s because the state inspector, by the way, who's a lot of fun, who comes out and fills you with good information and tells you what's working everywhere. Some people back in 2007 were having better wintering experience in cold climates with the 8 frame boxes over the 10 frame boxes, because the first and the 10th frame and the 10 frame boxes didn't seem to get accessed by the bees very well. I'm coming to the answer for the question, but I'm just giving you my through the years progress there on that. So then I started with the 8s, but they filled them chock-a-block. They filled them right up. So I went with the 10s because a lot of equipment, here's where it comes in, right? Compatibility of equipment. Everything seemed compatible with 10 frame. And some things were available for 8 frame, but not as much as for the 10. So I ended up with 10 frame boxes plus because my bees were filling that 8 frame here where I live. Then the 10 frame was a smart move for me. So I went with 10 frame gear. Then I also have 8 frame equipment. That's where I put Catch a Swarm, put them in the 8 frame deep brood box, and they do okay. I never bought nucleus colonies. So these are the things these are the terms that are assigned to what people do when they get their first batch of bees, right? So you can collect a swarm. Total gamble, no guarantee you're going to get one. So the people that want to get a beehive, set it out as a trap, hope the bees will just move in. Because I was on with the live stream with FlowHive, which comes on every Tuesday through their channel. And people were asking when I set up my FlowHive, how do the bees come? So thinking it's like putting up a bird box, blue bird box, whatever you've got. And then the bird just finds it and moves in. Possible? Not likely, because all your equipment in a brand new piece of gear is brand new and doesn't smell like bees have ever lived there before. So your best bet, if you want to be sure to be keeping bees now in 2022, which is the coming season for us, you're going to want to put in an order for a package of bees or a nucleus of bees. The nucleus is generally 5 frame nucleus colony. That has a queen, she's laying, all the workers know the queen, all the frames are drawn out, they have capped brood, they have open brood, they have all the developing stages. That's your fastest source for a buildup. So that's why I'm giving you 2 options, right? So if I had a nucleus colony, 5 full frames deep, I would go ahead and put that straight into an 8 frame or a 10 frame box because they're already drawn out, they're already full, and they're already potentially crowded. Some people sell nucleus colonies in the spring, brimming, ready to go, and it is not at all rare for a nucleus colony to suddenly swarm and divide themselves. So we want to avoid that. That's why if it's a nucleus colony, I put it directly in an 8 or 10 frame deep box and leave it there until they fill out those extra frames, and then that's when you start supering. So that's that configuration. Now let's say you get a package of bees. So a package is generally 3 pounds of bees and a queen who's ready to lay, right? So now here's where the configuration for me has changed through the years. If you get a package of bees and you install them in the big box, they do okay. They draw a comb, the queen starts laying, and they start to build out those frames. What I've learned since, you can learn no matter how many years you've been keeping bees. And that's the point of it, right? We need to learn constantly. So then I took just a package of bees or a swarm of bees, and I put them in a nucleus colony, just a 5 frame deep nuke. And here's what I learned. Well, first of all, some swarms are so big, I can't fit them in a nucleus box. So that 5 frame box, too small for a big prime swarm in the spring. So those do go, if they're too big, obviously too populated, they go directly into an 8 frame or 10 frame deep, and we fill those up and let them finish drawing out the comb and going from there. But if you have a package or a small swarm, they do much better if you put them in the 5 frame nucleus box. So that's why it's not a simple, straightforward answer for that stuff, because they're going to work out differently. And this happens in the beginning of the year, of course, going into a nectar flow. So they're in a time of rapid expansion. A package of bees is going to take longer to build up. Queen's going to start laying, and it's going to be a while, 30 days on average, before you start seeing fully matured bees hatching out, doing their orientation flights and things like that in that box. So you have to size and make your choices based on what your source is, how populated it is, how near swarming they are, and smaller boxes for smaller clusters, smaller swarms, things like that. Smaller package definitely works out better in a nucleus box. And the question would be, well, what's your favorite nucleus box? Well, I like the wooden ones. They're really heavy duty, built to last. They have migratory covers, although you can get them with telescoping covers and a standard inner cover and everything else. But I will be probably doubling or even tripling my nucleus box bank of resources, because I'm going to use them for a lot of different things. One is, of course, backup queens for my other colonies, backup brood, eggs, open larvae, capped brood. For example, if I want to reinforce a colony that's a little behind, I just want to give them a bunch of nurse bees, then I keep these nucleus colonies down at maintenance level so I can use their resources and spread them out through the rest of the apiary. So they work really well. And then going into winter, so well ahead of winter time, I took the nucleus boxes and I put a second story on them, also a 5-frame deep. So now I have basically a 10-frame. So if we had a single 10-frame deep box, all your frames are side by side. And that's okay. But now see how the bees, if they're clustered in the middle in wintertime, they have to go to one side or the other. And here, guess where the cluster goes? They go to the warm side, which is the eastern side, east to southeast. So the cluster through winter, if it's in a single deep, gradually makes their way to the side that gets warm, gets the sun's warmth earliest in the day. So for me, they migrate towards the east, which means as winter goes and they move up to the top single box, and then they don't do a good job of moving the other direction and cleaning up surplus resources that they should be consuming early in the year. But sometimes they just don't. They end up stuck, and that's where the emergency feeding, but we're going to talk about that later too. These are things to consider with the different box configurations. So I have 3 nucleus colonies that went into winter with brood all in that bottom box with 5 frames, and the second box has 5 frames full of honey. So with the 5/5 configuration, they're in a much better situation for surviving winter, because now they will occupy only those 5 frames, which is what they tend to do anyway on their own. That's why some people don't do anything bigger than an 8 box. So they stay with the 5 frames, and then they're going to migrate up into that honey because it's a smaller space. They actually do better. Yes, we all know they don't heat the whole space, but there is passive heat and passive heat loss in these boxes. That's why none of them have upper vents. They have a single entrance. That's it. And then so they will migrate up into that heat capsule, and the migratory covers, obviously terrible insulation up there. So they each have a 2-inch thick polystyrene cap on them that goes down over the sides of that upper box to help them keep and maintain the heat capsule where? Directly on those solid packed deep frames of capped honey. And I want to thank the person that brought those over to me, made those insulated nucleus covers for me. And we're going to see how that goes this winter. But those are the things to think about. So it's not a straight, do I put them in an 8 or 10 frame hive, or do I need to purchase a small nucleus? So here's what I recommend to everybody that does not have nucleus boxes. Get the very best nucleus boxes that you can. And the ones I got from betterbee.com. And they have all the options for nucleus boxes. But I like the ones that are wood, they're built to last, and the ones with a hole in the front instead of the standard landing board. And that's because that little hole, much easier for them to defend, because remember, there are always going to be small colonies of bees in there. And the other thing is, during wintertime, I don't have to scrape them out because any dead bees that collect on the bottom will not plug that exit hole. So that's personal preference. If you want your landing boards to be standard with entrance reducers, or if you want that little circle there with the dial on the front, that they're either open, they're vented, and there's a queen excluder, and then there's a bumblebee excluder. So great stuff, great choices. And I gave a long explanation on that very simple question. But see, things are not as straightforward as you might think. We're on to question number 2 now. Peter, I live in southern New Hampshire. I'm interested in if the queen excluder frame can be used with a drone frame. Would it require more days? Would it harm the hive's relationship with the queen if she's suddenly only laying drones or having a brood break? I've had issues having the queens use a drone frame, so she may not use it. What's a drone frame look like? Sorry about that. So here we go. Drone frame. This one happens to be from Acorn. This one is double dipped, double waxed. The cells are large. The reason for that is, and that's also why they're always green, by the way, because when you put those in your hive, you want to know that you have one that's dedicated to drone comb. People use it as part of their integrated pest management practices. And the pest that they're trying to manage with drone comb is going to be the Varroa destructor mite, which is also what we're talking about here with Peter, talking about the frame that excludes the queen. And keep in mind, this is a test, by the way, although these have been in use. There's just other methods for it. But anytime somebody wants to trap the queen on a frame, this is standard worker comb. So you can see what that looks like. Let's do a quick, just so you can see the comparison here. That is, see how big the cells are? Drone comb, worker comb. So with my test, with what I'm going to do, and this is with the colony, if they show up with a high mite count, I may not do this at all unless I have a colony that's dealing with a mite load and they're not coping on their own. But pretty sure I'm going to get a colony that ends up with a high mite load at the beginning of the nectar flow. And the only reason that we're doing this, by the way, is as a backyard beekeeping test, because if you're a commercial beekeeper taking a queen out of production for weeks by trapping her on the comb in order to control the Varroa destructor mites is not going to make sense, right? They're going to use an approved method. They're going to use something that treats the mites. They're going to use Formic Pro or something like that, which is formic acid, which allows the queen to keep laying, everybody keeps going, and they go ahead and they continue their production without losses. But this came into play because people were asking me as backyard beekeepers. Here's the issue. In some of the suburban areas where they're allowed to keep bees, they're limited. You can only keep 2 colonies. Heaven forbid it's only 1 colony that you can keep. So if there were any kind of ordinance going on for discussion and they were talking about backyard beekeepers and how many colonies they could keep, I would put it 2 as a minimum, because that way you have 2 hives to work against each other. But then when they have that, now you've got colonies that build up, you risk a couple of things. One, that they could swarm. So they build up in the spring and they catch people off guard. It happens all the time. We have beekeeper breakfasts. Everybody talks about, oh, my hive swarmed already. It's barely warm. It barely, we barely are getting into temperatures when we can work the colonies, and off they went. No big deal if you live in the country the way I do, because your swarms can find a place to be. But as the beekeeper, you have to get ahead of it, right? So this does 2 things. It reduces production of the queen, because you get your queen when you're doing your inspection in early spring, and you find the brood frame that the queen is already on. So she's already laying there. You see eggs, you see open brood, and you've picked your queen. There she is. This cover goes right over the top of it, covers the bottom, the side, and the top. It's a queen excluder. And this goes right against either the side of the box, which is how I plan to use it, interior side, east side, southeast side facing. Because that's where the bees are tending to do their brood in spring anyway. Then the rest of the hive is blocked off so that all of the eggs and the open larvae and everything else that's out there, but we already pulled one of the primary frames of eggs and larvae out. So we've stopped production for the queen. So we're going to keep her here for 14 days. This is kind of complicated, so I'm going to post what my method is going to be, because the other thing was, after keeping her here for 14 days, causing the brood break, we've got reduction instead of production. The game was to pull this out after the 14th day, release the queen, get the queen excluder out of there, let the queen go back to laying on the rest of the colonies, and that gives us up to day 22 or 23 to give them an oxalic acid vaporization treatment, a single treatment knocking out more than 95% of phoretic mites. So that's a mite move right there, but we also have reduction in the number of bees in the colony going into spring, which if you're a sideliner, any kind of commercial beekeeper, you're going to hate that method because it sets them back. If you're a person that just keeps bees for the joy of beekeeping and you don't want to do extensive treatments, risk losing your queen, by the way, with Formic Pro. And so if you don't have other hives to work with, and the hives that you do have, you want to keep them under control. So that's a control method for both varroa mites, reducing population of the colony, and then having your bees not swarm or overwhelm you when you're trying to keep your numbers down. And then hopefully as the spring evens out, then your bees go back to work and you're back in the game. And what I was going to do is, of course, pull out that first frame of worker brood, not drone brood. And I'll get to that in just a second. But I was going to pull that out and just freeze it and then take it out and feed that to the chickens and then put it back in the colony. But now I've rethought that. So if I'm doing up to 4 colonies at once, right? And we just talked about those nucleus boxes. My plan is then on the 14th day to take the cage off, pull that frame out, because that's the one now that has capped brood and it's got a bunch of Varroa destructor mites in it. We want to get that out of there. And we could put that in a separate nucleus colony. That's queenless. That's why I say up to 4 of them, because what's the 5th frame going to be, which is probably going to be right in the center? A frame of eggs and open larvae, and maybe some capped nurse bees, right? So there'll be nurse bees when they hatch out. So then when I do that, then I set the calendar for those. They're not going to have newly capped brood for a while. And I'll hit a threshold there where I can also treat that, and I have a separate colony, and I can do a single shot of oxalic acid vaporization there. And then I can, if I'm only allowed to keep 2 colonies of bees, I've got a nucleus colony right there, just knocked out all of the Varroa destructor mites. They had to make their own new queen from the eggs that we provided them. And then what's going to happen? You give that to your friend, or you go to your beekeeping club and you say, I've got a nucleus that's just been treated for mites and they're 95% wiped out. So now you're not throwing them away. Win, win, win. We just separated them. Now we have 4 treated colonies potentially. Anyway, that's the overview of it. But I would not take the cage. It would fit, by the way. Drone comb, cage the queen on that. First of all, the comb, the frame that we're going to cage the queen on, because the queen excluder, of course, allows all the nurse bees to get in and out, take care of the queen, and feed the larvae and all that, because she's going to lay eggs in here. If the comb is not already fully drawn out, we're really impacting her, because if they don't draw out this comb, because it's all drone comb, and drone is what the bees make when the colony's at its max and they're already doing extremely well, and you already see evidence of them starting to make drone cells or capping drone larvae, then you could be in a pickle. So I would not personally use drone frames and drone comb for that isolation of the queen or trapping the queen for the purpose of varroa mite control. So I hope that makes sense. But I'm going to write that down exactly what my plan is, and I'm going to show the time frames and everything else so that if anybody else wants to test that out, I'm just trying it out this year. And by the way, those metal frames come from Blue Sky Beet Supply. I have nothing to do with them. But of course, these are designed to follow a specific method of trapping the queen. I think they posted their own information on there. So just keep in mind that what I'm doing this year is I'm trying something different, just on my own, to see how it goes. And people have written me and said that's just not going to work. But we're going to find out if it works. We're going to see what happens. I'm going to share that with you. And it's a great way, in my opinion, to control your highest mite count beehives. Next one, question number 3 from Beginner. Would you mind explaining how to do splits and when to do them? As a beginner, I understand there is likely to be a population boom in early spring, and I'm unsure of the best way to start new colonies to prevent swarming. So, The thing that I just described is a way to prevent swarming and can also start a new colony, nucleus colony, pull in the frames and so on. But making splits is really easy. And I did a video about it, so I'm going to put a link to the video on how to make a split. But in spring, it requires that you look carefully at your frames, at your hives, but I do what's called a walk-away split. That is, maybe that's lazy beekeeping, but here's the beauty of it. When I have a colony of bees, it did extremely well through winter, so we have great genetics there. They did fantastic. They're just booming. And you just see pollen zipping in there as early as February. And so we know they're growing fast, and you better do something, because here's what can happen, and it's not too late. You look in your colony and you see that they're making queen cells already. Or you look for queen cups along the fringe of your frames, and they've got queen cups, but they haven't laid in them yet. Good news. That's what we want. We want to head off the actual production of queen cells. But don't give up if you find queen cells, even partially constructed queen cells. Because then what you can do is, we're going to divide the resources of the hive. So we've got a 10-frame hive right here. And then we've got that nucleus box that you just bought because you just watched a video on YouTube and somebody suggested, get a nucleus box. It's the best way for them to build up and get things started. So what do we need? Do I have to find the queen in that hive? We're going to look in there and we're going to say, oh, look at the eggs. Oh, look at all the larvae. Oh my gosh, there's thousands of them on that frame. Oh, look at the next frame right over there. Also eggs, larvae open, and they're already capping some larvae and stuff. Big patterns. Both of them are identical. So we know we've got a laying queen because there's eggs there, and the patterns are good. And we've got 2 frames with really good patterns. Then the frames outboard of that have smaller brood pattern. So what else are they bringing in? Pollen. So we've got pollen on the fringe over here. So what we want to do is divide resources. It doesn't hurt to take more resources. 2 ways to do this, by the way. But I'm going to talk about this is in a walk-away split. So we pull the resources, eggs, larvae, pupae, everything, and we put them in our 5-frame box. And then maybe there's a frame still half full of honey. Put that in, outboard frame there. And then, we've got some drawn comb that seems empty right now. Well, let's pull that. Or it's half full of something. Put that in there too. Now we've left them, the parent colony, and when we brought the nucleus box over to do this, it already has 5 deep frames in it. Maybe they're not drawn comb because you're a new beekeeper and you don't have a bunch of drawn comb. So you bring those 5 empty frames, so each frame that you pull, you replace it with one of the empty frames, but you have to push together the frames that have the larvae on it, the eggs that are on it, and the resources like the pollen that they've stored and everything else. That gets pushed to the center to fill the ones that you pulled out, and your empty frames go outboard of that. So you're pushing them to the center, and then you've got the extra frames out. Now there's 2 things that you can do. Because the next question that people ask is, if I do that split, how far away do I have to take those bees? Well, I put them right in the same apiary. I don't put them, sometimes they're not 10 feet apart from each other, although the greater separation, the better. But guess what you can do? You can take the established colony and you can move that to the new location, right? Which may have the queen in it, might not. If you find the queen and you move the queen out with the new colony, that's fine. But if you take the main box, after you've drawn out the frames that you wanted and put those resources in your 5-frame nucleus colony, you take that big box, you put it over there where the new location is going to be. You take your 5-frame nucleus box and you put it right where the old colony was, because the foragers are going to come out and come right back to that box. Some of the foragers that are in the box that you just moved are going to depart. They're going to do their foraging, but they're going to come right to this location. So you're fortifying the nucleus colony with workers. To me, that doesn't make a huge difference, because we will shake nurse bees off into the nucleus colony if that's one being moved off by itself, because nurse bees don't know where they live. They're going to take off and eventually do orientation flights, and then they're going to, wherever they hatch out, wherever they do their first orientation flights, that's where they're going to stay. So for me personally, because I'm lining up my nucleus hives separate from the regular deep ones, I don't do the swapping, to harvest the foragers like that. I leave the resident, deep, large hive body where it is, and then I just pull the frames out, put them in a nucleus, and put them in the new location. And that worked really well last year in particular, because last year's the first year I actually bought nucleus boxes. I know, I'm a slow learner, because I only worked with 8 or 10 frame equipment before that. So ever since 2007, I've been working with 8 or 10 frame equipment exclusively and didn't want nucleus colonies. Why? Because they get out of hand, they build too fast, and they swarm out. And for other people, well, isn't that the purpose? Don't you want them to build fast? So yeah, smaller cavities, they control the climate better and they expand faster. So I hope that's clear how to make a split. You have enough. Now, if you get in there and there's only 2 or 3 frames of brood total in the hive that you're looking at, they're not ready to be split. So you have to look at the population. We have to make sure that when we divide them, that we still have a minimum number of bees to continue on business as a eusocial insect, which means the division of labor has to continue on, and they have to have enough bees to do that. So if you don't have 6 or 7 frames with some brood and some resources, even though you get to the center, and there's larger frames that are 3/4 brood or almost completely brood, if you don't have enough of those resources, don't do the split, because some people get anxious and try to split everything early, and then they end up with a bunch of really weak colonies. So I don't recommend that. So I hope it made sense of that. If there's still more questions about it, ask away. When we do a live feed, we can follow up on some of these questions, by the way, the live stream. Question number 4, Ross from Pittman, New Jersey. Ordered a package of bees, and would you suggest bee weaver or Saskatraz or other? Okay, so here's the thing about the bee weaver bees that come out of Texas. You can't order a package of bees from them. You can, but you have to go there physically and pick them up. They don't ship packages at all. They do ship queens, but you already have to have bees in order to install your queen, and they have to be queenless, or you need to make a split at that time, which, by the way, what we previously just discussed, where you create the split. Once you realize which of those hives actually has a queen in it, if you know already, within the next 4 or 5 days, you can go ahead and fly in and install a laying queen into that colony that is now queenless when you've made your split. So, but you don't get the brood break that you otherwise would have had. So anyway, back to this. So Saskatraz packages. Last year, we had a terrible experience with Saskatraz because I recommended, well, first of all, I've been evaluating them and I gave up on them, but then I got talked back into using Saskatraz bees last year. But then those of you who ordered packaged bees here in the United States last spring, a lot of them didn't make it. 2 out of 3 packages that I ordered in, because I was trying to populate my Layens hive, I was going to repopulate the Long Langstroth hive, and then I was just going to have one for kicks. So I ordered 3. Well, only one of them survived. And by that I mean survived shipment and was healthy enough to even be installed, and then they sold no replacement packages. And so I'm going to get to what my recommendation is going to be. And then the one that I did install on my Long Langstroth hive, that hive had problems. They superseded the queen, so I lost those genetics anyway, and they never finished. When they did the supersedure, they did not finish filling out the frames available in that hive, so it wasn't like they were too loaded or populated, and that happened. So I don't recommend them right now. Now, if you live in Canada, it's my understanding, Saskatraz from Saskatchewan, Canada, if you can get those original lines of Saskatraz bees in Canada, you're getting a much better performing line of bee than if you buy them here in the United States. They will sell the packages. We bought them through Mann Lake, but they come from the Olivarez family, the breeders in Northern California. So they had just a terrible shipping experience last year. So I'm not saying don't use them. I'm saying I don't endorse them personally. So then what do? What else would I recommend? So the other thing is I used to have a really good list of proven lines of bees that could handle Varroa destructor mites on their own, that were disease resistant, Varroa sensitive hygienic line bees, VSH, and These breeders are either not returning emails to people, or they're not answering the phone, or they're out of business when it comes to breeding. So what I do now is suggest that you contact people through your own either state beekeepers association or your county beekeepers association. You find out from the scuttlebutt around the group who's got good bees, who's honest about the bees they sell. Are they healthy? Do they treat for varroa? If they do, what are they? Do they use the Purdue ankle biters, which is something you can look into on your own? Russian bees have a good track record, but they can be a little bit hot. Italian bees, if you're in the southern states, are top performers for producing honey and keeping huge brood patterns and things like that. Up in the north, not so great. They need a lot more resources getting through winter, and some of the hottest colonies I've ever had were Italian line colonies of bees. So local bee breeders, if you can find them within driving distance, that have a proven track record, that they're doing things right, and that the traits that their bees have are traits that you want. You're not going to get better bees. Better bee. You're not going to get better bees than those that are already adapted to your agricultural zone, to your climate, to the rhythm of the nectar flow and the pollen resources and the types of winters that you have. So you need to talk to these people who are often not very vocal about their successes, which is interesting to me. These are quiet, genius beekeepers that keep it close to the vest, the things that they're doing that get their bees through winter and the way they're configured, and they just kind of got things down. And then they quietly will sell nucleus colonies and things like that, and there are people that breed queens and other things. So you always talk to the others about it to see, hey, have you ever got packages from so-and-so? Have you ever got queens from so? How did they do? How did they work out? Were they the way that you thought they would be? And the other thing is, as a person that's going to sell you that package, do they back them up? And will they help you out with them? If you're a brand new beekeeper, the person selling you the bees should be more than willing to answer your questions and help you get through your first year with beekeeping and help you with issues that you might be facing, including going over how to install your bees and what to put them in and things like that. So I don't recommend anymore. Although if I'm buying a queen, if I'm going to pay for the genetics and I'm going to buy a queen, I look at the national weather patterns for the upcoming week, because I can send in an order to BeeWeaver in Texas and I look to see if it's going to be super hot or super cold or what's going on, and then I order that bee on a good weather week and I have a colony to put them in when they get here. And then of course you can do splits and work from those, which of course alter the genetics of the queens that you get. So you want to get your queen in, mark the queen, get it in the colony, and you want to keep her from swarming out for sure, because that's your stock. So I hope that helps with that. You're going to want to talk to people. And the list that I used to have is just obsolete. It's no good anymore. People with approved or known successes with those genetics, but buckfast bees, if you can get them, Russian bees, and then of course I'm not happy with Saskatraz, bee weavers, and then just find out who's got mutts in your area. If you talk to Randy Oliver, he doesn't give you a breed, he's just got mutts, stuff that he's arrived at. But what are his problems? His problems are that they're not breeding true yet. So again, whatever you get, if they swarm or do something, you've got bees, but those genetics are going to be watered down after they start to split and swarm and do things like that. Question number 5. Kenneth says, Fred, you were talking early about splits and queen rearing and getting the colonies as ready as possible for those events. That brought up a question I've had rolling around for a while. If you have stock that is good and you like their traits, why not add extra drone frames to the colonies you want to mate with the queens that your splits produce to get some of the qualities of each? Say Italian and Caucasian. I would think if you flood your area with drones, you want your queen to mate with there would be a better chance of it happening. Where my bees are, there are no hives other than mine or wild colonies for over 10 miles. I can't tell you, by the way, how happy I would be if I lived in an area where I were the only beekeeper for 10 miles in every direction. That's a sweet spot. Kenneth has a real opportunity to breed his own bees and have no outside influence on the genetics there. So I already do this. There's no reason, actually, by the way, to put in this green drone foundation. This works. I mean, they'll draw it out because when they're not producing drones, they use that comb, the larger celled comb. They use it for, of course, honey stores. But here's what they do anyway. If you have deep foundation and the normal small cells, this happens to be an acorn frame. So if you have this, they don't always follow the embossing on the bottom of this. Because when you get to the outside, to the bottom corners and things like that, they will start to build larger comb. In fact, you'll see halfway across a frame where they transition into drone comb, which is the largest cells that you're going to see on your frames for production. So they kind of do it on their own. And also, if you have foundationless frames, you let them build their own, they will make a percentage of that drone. Bees on their own, if they're doing extremely well, will produce up to 20% of their brood in drone comb, which is why a lot of people pull that out, because they don't want a bunch of drones. Or they use drones for their mite control, so they pull those cells out. So there's another thing that you can do, and that is if you take a deep box and you put a couple of medium frames in them. So you got worker frames, but they're only medium in depth, and they go part way down, height-wise, so there's a big gap underneath of them. When the bees extend the comb in a deep box to the bottom of a medium frame, they build drone comb just automatically. It's pretty funny, actually. And that's why some people use that as their Varroa mite collection method. Then they open their frames, they pull the frames when they're doing inspections, and they see that the drone comb is capped. They cut it off and throw it away and let the bees draw out a new set of drone comb. Well, resource-wise, it's pretty expensive on the bees. So, but here's what I do. I don't get rid of drone comb in my hives, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. I am trying to send out the healthiest, fastest flying drones in every direction that I can because I want my bees' genetics out there. So the thing is, it is the slow burn. So this is the long-term investment, right? Because initially, I'm letting those drones fly out, and I've got drones that are, Grand Central Station for drones in colonies that they are just flying everywhere. And so I send out drones through the years. This is not just a one and done, like one season we did it. We flooded the area with our drones, and hopefully they mated. Because what I'm trying to do is, because I have neighbors that keep bees, and they catch swarms and things like that. So there's a lot of open mating going on out here. We don't have any choice. If there's mating going on, it's open mating. So we can't really control who shows up at the drone congregation areas and where the queens are going to go and who they're going to mate with. Drones are very good at smelling the queen's sex pheromone at that point when a virgin queen is in flight. And they're not so excited about zooming in on a queen that's producing a pheromone that makes them very closely genetically tied. So, for example, drones from a colony that produce the queen that the queen flies out of, when they get in there, the drone comet, it's called, it's shaped like a comet, they're following the queen around. If they're in the pheromone stream and that's their mom, okay, they just don't mate with her. So they lose their incentive to mate because just they're coded to mate with queens they're not directly related to. So, so your neighbor has queens, they fly out, and your drones are in the air. You want your drones to be so powerful, so healthy, and so capable that they're going to mate with them, because in the year after that, that queen has gone through winter, she's producing drones, they're flying out, and now you're going to get some of your traits back in theory. Are we really going to be able to saturate an area with their own genetics so much that we're going to get the favorable traits that we've been putting out back to us with the virgin queens that we send out that fly and get mated. Now, if you're 10 miles from everything, what you really need to do is split your colonies and set up drone colonies, mating yards and things like that. So when you get your queens set, your virgin queens, and you know that they're going to mate, you get them away from your main apiary. We know that a queen can fly a maximum of 9 miles to mate with a random stranger. So, but if you put her 5 or 6 miles out, and then you've got your drone yard where you've got colonies of bees, and that they're the ones that are loaded with your drone comb and everything else, and they're from other colonies within your yard that also have the favorable traits that you want. Now those drones are likely to mate with the virgin queens from your queen rearing yard. So now, and then you bring back, the results of that. You can, once those get mated, you bring those back, you rotate others out, and then you're in queen production business. And then if you ultimately someday, it takes hundreds of colonies of bees, by the way, to do this successfully, according to the experts, because I'm not a queen breeder or a drone breeder, but hundreds of hives, hundreds of colonies to do it right, and the consistent stock breeding. When you start seeing the traits, and then you're getting rid of colonies, of course, that don't have any traits. Don't play games. This is Darwinian beekeeping. You're going to get rid of colonies that don't have the traits that you want. You don't want their drones flying. You don't want the competition if you have an area that you can control. So the next stage of that is, let's say you lived in an area where all beekeepers were friendly and they all talk to each other and they're all happy to get on board with some program with one another. And then you can get everybody to start raising their own bees that have the same traits or genetic lines that you do. And then all their drones, everybody's sending out drones from the same kind of stock, right? They're not direct descendants from each other's queens, but they all have the same traits that you're trying to build in an area. In a perfect world, which does not exist, in a perfect world, everybody would be sending out the same genetics, the same traits, and those genetic lines that you're trying to get in your own hive. But it just, even for people that have tried this for years, that's why the Weaver family was able to do what they do, because they're able to isolate their breeding yards. Their queen starter yards, queen finishing yards, and then their breeder yards, their drone congregation, their drone yards. And they're able to control that because they can be far enough away from other apiaries that they're not impacted. And hopefully the Africanized genetics, which is the greatest concern in Texas there, and Florida and other places, keeping those out of your genetic line is another game too. So it's just, you end up with a lot of food for thought, but nothing wrong with flooding your area with drones from your favorite colonies. Likewise, if you've got colonies in your apiary that are not performing well, don't you dare let them produce 20% drone frames unless you're going to pull them when they're capped. That's why these things fail. These green things fail because we know that it takes, they're going to cap those on the 9th day. So you've got the 9th to the 24th day after they start capping. You got to get them out of there before they hatch, but we get busy, we get distracted, and next thing you know, you got to pull that sweet, green deep frame, and it's already hatched out, and half of them are gone, and of course they're the ones that had Varroa and took them with them. So super annoying how that works and gets out of hand sometimes. Question number 6, Michael Hall. I notice you're an advocate of an entrance higher up the hive in the summer. I had one as you have, but when I removed the round plug, I soon put it back, same day, due to the wasp trying to get in that additional opening. What do you think about a hole at the bottom front of the flow box? Okay, so the biology is the same, whether it's a flow hive or anything else. I did back in the day. So this is part of the evolution of beekeeping that we follow as we go and gain experience with our own bees and learn as we go. I no longer do upper entrances. I don't do upper venting. All of my hives have entrances at the landing board or just slightly elevated. So my highest entrances in any of my hives right now, the Layens hive, because it comes that way. And I bought the thing from horizontalhives.com, Dr. Leo Sherishkin's website. And it has bees in it, by the way, We don't know how they're doing yet because they can't do thermals on it because it's super insulated with lamb's wool. So, but those entrances are up off the bottom. My horizontal long Langstroth hive also has bees in it, and its entrance is up off the bottom as well because that's the way I made it. So I don't have to worry about cleaning dead bees out of there. There are no upper entrances, no upper vents. And then all my Langstroth hives only have the landing board entrance. Now you could take if you've got a slatted rack or something in the bottom, you could go up off the bottom, you could drill a little 3/4 inch hole right in the front there and make that your entrance off the bottom. That puts your entrance at 3/4 of an inch at least, probably a full inch off the bottom where your landing board is, if you drill that hole into your slatted rack. So that's one way to get off the bottom, but I no longer promote, at least where I live, see, it's climate related, really. But I have no upper vents, no upper entrances the way I used to when I first started out with flow hives, and I felt that I was getting faster nectar flow into the flow super by having an entrance in a box above that. And they were coming in through that, a medium super up there, and then they were going straight down into the flow frames and filling them faster in theory. But when I removed that, so the only way to know if the modifications that you make are working or not, or are better or not for your specific area, is to leave some the same and do others differently. If you modify your entire apiary with a new idea across the board, unless it's something that's absolutely proven to work already and you're not trying to work out the details yourself, but if you're working out what works best for you as far as upper entrances, single lower entrances, venting, no venting, we have to offer those variables at the same time that we make the change to make the improvements that we think will improve the life and production level for the bees. If we do it all the same, then we just don't know. We could just end up saying we have a bad year or something like that. But you have to have a control where it's something that's been unaltered. And that's why for me, the changes that I made through the years are gradual because I change one or two things at a time. I don't whole hog change the whole thing and have a radical change in what I'm doing as far as bee housing or feeding or whatever it happens to be. I have to keep some the same and make the change in stages so I know at what point the change I was making either improved beekeeping or caused a problem. Then I got to go back to the way I was doing whatever it happened to be. So I hope that makes sense too. If you change everything all at once, unless you're going off somebody else that did a really good study, a very convincing example of how something works or didn't, then, of course, make your changes and see how that works. But, and then my nucleus colonies also have that little 3/4 inch thing up off the bottom, so I don't have to worry about cleaning those out either. But this is my first winter with nucleus colonies, so we're going to see how that goes. This is question number 7 now. Sean Webb, Iowa City, Iowa. Concerning your plan for the 2022 mite control that you're planning to treat on day 21 to 24 window before capping, and this is that caging of the queen that I was talking about. On the day 21 to 24 window before capping of any new brood, and I have read that the mite enters the cell 1 or 2 days before the cell is capped. Will OA reach these mites hiding under the larvae, or might you have to shorten the window to day 21 or 22? So oxalic acid vaporization does not work under capped brood. And just as described here, the mite does. The mite that hopes to mate, the foundress mite, the jerk of all jerks in your beehive, gets in there and gets right down underneath your larvae, right? Because they want to hang out because once it's capped, they can't get in there. So as long as the cap is open, and this is why this works, when you have Varroa sensitive hygienic bees, another thing that they often do is if they can smell mites in a cell, they'll uncap the cell of a developing larva that's in its pupa state already. And when they do that, it kills the Varroa destructor mite inside that cell. It makes it so that, well, not the adult, but the reproduction is interrupted. So now that's an exposed cell, and if you hit that with oxalic acid vaporization, where does the vapor go? It goes everywhere. So that means once that cap is off and you did an oxalic acid vaporization treatment, then that vapor goes into the open cell as well and lands on that developing larvae. What's the potential damage for that pupa? I don't know. It has demonstrated that it shouldn't be damaging to the pupa. Would it be damaging to Varroa destructor mites sharing that cell with the pupa at that point? It should, in theory, because that's going to put that oxalis on the interior surfaces and on that pupa itself, and then the mite's going to clamber all over it. It's going to get it on its little, because see, they don't even know. Even Dr. Ramsey, in all of his brilliance, hasn't figured out exactly why oxalic acid vaporization kills the Varroa destructor mite. So hoping somebody comes up with an answer for that soon, but we know that it works. So if it gets through the little soft pads on their 8 little legs when they're clambering around, and that's what kills them. So now we have dead mites in the cell, even though they'll cap it again for that pupa to finish, for that larva to finish its pupa state. So if it's exposed, oxalic acid vaporization, in theory, should work to get those mites because it wasn't capped in time. And of course, that would be a very tiny percentage. Even if a couple did get in there, it'd be a very tiny percentage that actually got in and away from that oxalis. So, let's see how, I'm anxious for next year to see how that caging the queen works and the single treatment and getting them in their phoretic phase, which is when the mites are exposed and clambering around and other bees looking for places to hide like those cells. Question number 8 from Art Diaz, El Paso, Texas. El Paso, Texas. That's a very active area. A lot of questions about that area down there. Anyway, thank you for the great education you've been giving us and what knowledge you have. And by the way, you're welcome and thank you for watching, by the way. What knowledge you have of the Texas 5,000 bees? None. I don't know anything about the Texas 5,000 bees. I've heard you talk about the bee weaver bees, which are pricier. I am planning on getting 2 hives going this coming spring. I'm doing this for bee population and personal use of the honey, which would be a good startup. Thank you for all the information. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't know anything about the Texas 5,000 bees, but I go right back to what I said at the beginning. Talk to the beekeepers in your area. Maybe they know about those bees and maybe they've used them and maybe they work really well. If they're local to you and you can physically go and pick them up or do a physical handoff of bees that is a nucleus or a package, whatever it happens to be, you're way ahead because they haven't been through the stresses associated with shipping the bees. Queens get shipped and sometimes they get exposed to heat that damages their fertility to some level to where they're not completely infertile. But you get a live queen, she looks great, she looks active, the other bees seem to accept her okay, and she gets in there and she's just not a very good performer. Something could have happened in transit that affected her fertility. So rather than wiping out and making her infertile, there are a lot of intermediate stages to that. So whenever you can physically get a direct handoff from a bee breeder of the queens or of the stock that they're selling, they're always way ahead. So if anybody else knows about these 5,000 bees, please write down in the comment section below this video and help us out with that. How are they doing? Where do you get them? How good are they? What are their traits? What are they known for? Because you want to keep bees just to keep them. Keeping this for bee population and personal use of the honey, you still want them to have traits. Here's the other thing. While I'm thinking about it on the fly here. Why do I buy a bee weaver queen at all? I can make my own queens. I can do my splits. I can do my walkaways. I can just do that all the time. What I can't do, for the reasons that I already described in today's conversation, is that I can't set up 200 hives in an area that's isolated and produce my own stock and go with the genetics that are going to perform well against Varroa destructor mites or resist disease and at the same time be somewhat manageable and produce a honey crop and handle the environment that I'm in. Since I can't do those things, once in a while I buy stock like the bee weaver queens First of all, to get their genetics, but also I want to support the bee breeders that are doing things in a way that I like to see things being done. So we cast our votes with our dollars. It's like I'm also a chicken guy. fredsfinefowl.com. And back in 2006, I published a DVD. Give you a second to get your pen so you can write it down. It's called Regarding Chickens, 3-hour backyard guide to raising chickens. But the reason I bring it up is I got, for the purposes of making that film, I wanted to carry the viewers. That's why it took 7 months to make this DVD. And that's because we wanted to show you from egg to hatching the eggs to adults. But we also wanted to show other methods to get chickens, just like there's other methods to get bees. And that is, you can buy day-old chicks through the mail. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people are dead set against it. Don't you dare put chicks going through mail handling. But the thing is, the Murray McMurray Hatchery Company, they were the largest rare breed hatchery in the United States at the time. So what I like to do is, of course, I can raise my own chicks. I can hand select my own birds. I can put that rooster with that hen, or make a trio, a rooster and 2 hens. And I set them aside for a couple of weeks because I want to make sure that all the eggs that they're laying have not been fertilized potentially by another rooster. And then they're going to breed true with the rooster that I put them with. And so then I can hatch my own. But I want to support the efforts of the rare breed, livestock conservancy and things like that. So not just chickens, all livestock. When you find people that are preserving animals, in this case we're talking bees, but I'm also talking about chickens and others, support the breeders financially that are handling stock that you want to see continued. Right now in my yard we have Minorca chickens. Now, those are Mediterranean birds, but they're actually, they're almost endangered when it comes to finding a breeder that has that stock anymore. So I buy from those breeders. I want to keep them going, and I want to keep the line going. Minorca chickens are the most outstanding foraging birds you're going to find. They run right out of the chicken coops when it's 29 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And as long as they can see grass, they're out there eating the grass. So here's the thing. If we don't support the breeders of these animals, then ultimately we risk losing the traits. We risk losing people like that are doing the work, that are maintaining stock that breeds true genetically. And so that's why I support places like Better Bee. There, I'm off my soapbox. But Texas 5000 bees, those might be great too. So when people are doing good work and they're breeding true and they're getting the genetics that you want, support them, even though we can do it ourselves, to some degree. I could have mutt chickens everywhere. By the way, you chicken people out there, because some people, bees and chickens, great companion animals. While I'm on that subject, I'm just going to waste your time right now. The topic comes up, why don't I have small hive beetles? And do my chickens have access to the bee yard? Do the bees sting the chickens? No. The bees are not stinging my chickens, even though Minorcans are black. I have others too. I raise Rhode Island Reds. We have other birds. Anyway, the Minorcans run through there, and they're always pecking at the ground. And little chicks, watch 6 and 7 week old chicks that come out of the chicken coop. They are constantly eating bugs too small for you to see. So if there's any kind of larvae on the ground coming up, emerging beetles, moths, anything else, they will run 50 feet to nab a moth on a blade of grass that's just coming up out of the ground early in the morning when it's still too wet for them to fly and things like that. They don't eat any bees at all. They won't eat wasps either. So they just inherently, somehow they know not to eat something that's poisonous. It wouldn't bother me if they did pick up dead bugs off the ground like bees and stuff, but they're very selective about what they eat. So I think they just might be doing a great job of keeping insects that have to go through a pupating state in the ground. They're doing a great job of digging those out and eating them. You never know. Now, I've not directly seen them do that, but if you're looking for chickens as a companion animal for your bees, look into Minorcans. They're pretty outstanding. So, let's see. This is from Brian. Good morning, Fred. We're south of you by about 400 miles. The weather here in northern Delaware is in the 40s midday. We are feeding dry sugar. I usually slip in a small piece of fondant to see if they're using it at this time of switching feed. The question is, does giving them fondant stimulate them, or as I see it, as an emergency backup? So, and that's something else. Remember what I said before, if you do everything to all your hives at one time, we have nothing to compare it to. So 50% of my colonies this winter, right now, have fondant on them. And it is that new Hive Alive fondant that I've showed you in the clear plastic packs. And I cut out a little circle to go over the inner cover. And it's the insulated inner cover, by the way, that I'm putting those on. And I put the label side down, so as they eat up into it, I'll be able to pop the top and look in there and see, even with the plastic over the top, whether or not they're consuming the fondant. The other colonies, their emergency feed is dry sugar. So what the heck is the difference? Why buy fondant, which, by the way, is $4 and something per pack. So if you're looking at Hive Alive on Amazon or whatever, and you see that it's $12, $13, $14 for one pack, don't buy that. It's cheaper from the actual company, or now they're also selling in bulk on Amazon too. So shop around, watch out for price gouging. But anyway, dry sugar is sucrose, and the bees need the moisture of the condensation that's in the hive in order to process the sugar. They even need moisture and condensation inside the hive to process stored honey, by the way, while we're thinking about it. So, but sucrose has to be inverted. So the bees have to have their enzymes work on it. They have to turn it into glucose and fructose. Okay, smaller molecules, consumable, metabolizing level stuff. So when you put in a fondant, then it's already inverted, and the bees can, of course, consume and metabolize it better. Does it stimulate them to put them into production, for example? No, it's still an emergency resource. So the other thing is, this is why I don't like pollen patties and things like that. I don't put pollen patties on my hives, especially going into winter. First of all, they can spoil easily. They don't last long. They can get brittle. And also, it's something, if your bees aren't using it, it could be a cleanup hassle. In some of the southern states, small hive beetles and things like that, you'll see larvae in them and stuff. So I would be, if I were making recommendations to people as an emergency feed for wintertime, it would be dry sugar or fondant. And there are winter patties, which basically are really just fondant, because they don't have the protein in them that pollen does, which would stimulate them to develop, again, to have brood at the wrong time of year. Because I want my bees, keep in mind, not commercial, not even a sideliner. So I want my bees to start producing brood in sync with the early pollen production that goes on from our trees, where I live here in Pennsylvania. So I don't want to boost them earlier. Now, would I do that differently if I were into honey production? If I were hired as a consultant, let's say, for somebody that has a commercial beekeeping operation, yeah, everything would be different. We wouldn't be caging queens and things like that either. So this is not production-related stuff. So I just want them to be alive when they go through spring, and I want to have stock that matches what the environment is producing, because I don't want to feed them all the time. So we're going to see how Hive Alive works. So that's fondant or dry sugar. And that's the reason why. The dry sugar, the bees use some of their energy to actually process it, where with fondant it's directly metabolized. So gives them a little boost there. But and we'll see if there's a big difference coming into spring. Is one colony stronger because they had Hive Alive on there, or are they the same as those that just had sugar? That's why we have those with and those without. Next question, number 10. This is from Matt, Niagara, Wisconsin. I have one Layens hive colony from a swarm I caught this past June. I've learned a lot from you and Dr. Leo S., which is Dr. Leo Sherishkin, horizontalhives.com. And I've got two questions here. Firstly, a bee biology question. I really appreciate your explanation of what triggers a colony to produce fat-bodied bees. But how does that work? Is it like the queen bee determines by the larvae's diet, or something else? It would seem that going into a time of dearth would inhibit the bees being able to feed their young a better quality diet. That's why they do it at the leading edge of the dearth, when there's still plenty of resources going on. The fat-bodied winter bees and fat-bodied bees in general, that is dictated by the queen. By the way, whether she lays a drone, whether she lays a worker egg, whether she lays a fat-bodied bee worker egg. And that's why there are discussions about whether or not that should be even a different caste of bee inside the hive, because they are different. And the queen decides when she lays that egg. So, and they do that at the beginning of when they sense a dearth coming in. And that's because resources are still fat. If they wait till they're in the dearth to try to produce them, fat-bodied winter bees have to be developed at a time when they have premium nutrition. Otherwise, they're also going to be deficient, and subsequently, they won't live as long. They won't be able to nurse bees in a time of few resources coming in and things like that. So that is stimulated by the environment, what the bees are bringing in through the door. And then, of course, the queen is in charge of whether she does that. And then the young respond, the nurse bees respond to the pheromone that is released by the larvae after they hatch from their egg. So that's how they know, oh, this one gets more of something, So they're all started off on royal jelly, and that used to be something they thought was exclusively just for the queen bees, but royal jelly is fed to all larvae for at least the first 3 days, and then it's the amount they feed and how many feedings through the day occur. So there are a lot of variables there, but it's pheromone based, and the workers know what to feed to which larvae based on that. So next, I'm currently building 4 more hives, but I'm buying 2 Russian nukes next summer that will come in Langstroth medium frames, and I'm planning on combining these in pairs turned 90 degrees, hanging them oriented vertically rather than horizontally. 2 Langstroth mediums combined this way make 1 Layens frame, just a bit deeper than a stock Layens frame, and I realize that this will mess up the approximately 5-degree incline of the cells. I've heard you explain that this is why bees won't use improperly mounted better comb. I've also seen on another bee YouTube video that bees are able to correct this, repairing and reforming the cells into the correct orientation. My question is twofold. Will this 90-degree shift do any harm to the open or capped brood already present? I don't know of any precedent for that being a problem. Once the brood is already developing, once the larvae is maturing, and if you change the orientation of the cell at that point, there shouldn't be any difference. And that's because when you have freshly hatched eggs, they do have a liquid that's provided in there, a feed, but it's highly viscous and it isn't going to run out. The bees tend not to use cells when they're beginning their use of a cell, if it is oriented to where, if you've ever picked up a frame of bees in the middle of a nectar flow, when they have fresh nectar in the cells, and you look at the frame and you're holding it up perfect, if you even tip it down to get better sunlight into the cells, on the opposite side, wet nectar just drops out of that like a spring rain. It just sprinkles out of it. That's the reason that the cells are angled in to begin with, is because sometimes they put water temporarily in there, but wet, new nectar that has not been dehydrated down is very liquid, has a high wetting ability, and depends on gravity to hold it into that frame, into that cell, while they dehydrate that down, and they continue to convert that into finished honey. So that's why if those were upside down or straight level, when you put that in the hive, then the bees, the workers, would not be using that for storage, and they don't take to it. And that's why sometimes with better comb, if people put it upside down, again, an unused cell, brand new, and if instead of angled like this so that the liquid and resources are held in there naturally, if it's level or if it actually slants down, they're not going to want to use it. So that's where that comes from. So those that are in production that have already hatched, that are developing, I see no reason why those would not be finished. But I hope you're going to share how that works out. Because overall, I kind of just instinctively, I don't like the idea of making the bees have to reconfigure the angle of established cells in drawn comb, just to correct it on something that we've already done there. And that's one of my pet gripes about the lay-ins hive in general is I would be so much ahead if all I had to do, now if all I had were lay-ins hives, that'd be fine. But having this mix mash of equipment and stuff that doesn't match up. So I have a lot of lay-ins frames, but I could not boost my lay-ins colony of bees with other resources as I do, like the nucleus colonies that I brought up earlier today. If I needed resources for another colony that's a little falling behind, or maybe they're queenless or something like that, I can just pull eggs and brood over there and get them right back in the game. I can't do it with my lay-ins hive because I would have to have another lay-ins hive to pull that from, and I just can't pull Langstroth frames and drop them in there. So, it's a huge source of frustration for me there. The long Langstroth horizontal hive is easy because I can swap frames anytime I want and reinforce them or add bees or anything else. So, it's a big source of frustration, but I hope that Matt keeps us updated on how well this works. Yeah, I want to know. Tell me. Share with us what's going on later. This is question number 11 from Bonnie Irwin in Michigan. Using the BeeSmart insulated cover, do you still tilt the hive? With the concave surfaces, would it work better if level? Does a screen bottom board make a difference? Screen bottom board, not much of a difference really, but when it comes to your hives and why we tilt them, this is the BeeSmart insulated inner cover. This is somewhat domed up here. And the purpose for that is so that when condensation builds up here, if condensation builds up there, because that's the whole point of having the insulated inner cover, is that no condensate forms on this surface. Let's say it did. Tilting your hive forward is still a good idea because what we're trying to do is not have water. Some of your colonies in the wintertime can produce a lot of water, especially with these rapid extreme changes in temperature. So the water will melt off down on the inside surfaces of your hive walls. When it hits the bottom, if you have screens, like we have, for example, the flow hive back here, they've got an aluminum screen and then a tray underneath. So any water that came down inside, so let's say it was held level or tilted back, water finds its way into the tray, which for those of you with flow hives in frozen areas, the tray needs to be upside down right now, but the water can run out of the hive, so it's not held there. If you have a solid bottom board with no screen and your hive's tilted back, here's your landing board, here's the back of the hive, it's tilted back and you get condensation going down the inside, it's going to follow the bottom of your bottom board and be retained in the hive. That's why in the wintertime or in the summertime, any time of year, let's just say, there's no reason to change it. Always tilt your hive towards the landing board so that rain that's hitting the front of the hive where the entrance is, gravity is helping it fall away from your entrance. If you're tilted back, you get driving rain against the front, melting snow and everything else. As it melts, it's going to run into the hive. If you're tilted towards the landing board, melting snow and things like that will drip away from the hive. So we're trying to keep that bottom board as dry as possible, right? So always tilt it. If these work the way they're supposed to, this is my first winter with them. If these work the way they're supposed to, we should not have a lot of condensation on the upper underside of this thing. The condensation should form on the walls. And there will be more condensation inside that hive with a single entrance than the bees need. So always have your landing boards tilted tilted towards the landing board. Question number 12. A lot of questions today, and I didn't even answer all of them. So I'm sorry if you posted a question and it was not covered today. I had to pick the ones that I thought would be valuable, just so that I'm not here for 3 hours putting you to sleep. Whatever happened to the plastic heavy wax frames that you received with cells that were holes along the edge of the plastic rather than the straight grooves of your regular plastic frames? You had mentioned that you thought small hive beetles might have trouble hiding in those cell holes like they do in the normal plastic grooves. I tried to find the video that you showed them in. Okay, so first of all, those are the Ceracell frames, and they were for the deep. So the concern by a lot of people, not me, but by a lot of people is, see these edges? They provide hiding places that maybe your bees can't get into if you had small hive beetles, and it's along the bottom too. The bottom has it on the deep frames, the medium frames don't have it, and there's also these little grooves up here on top that could provide hiding places for small hive beetles. So I can't show you the Ceracell frame that has those edges that are all, they're an extension, so the comb itself, those are holes that are sized for the bees, so there are no hiding places for the small hive beetles on those frames. The reason I don't have them is they gave me 10 of them, and it was a gift, by the way. They sent me a care package, which happened to show up just in time for me to use it. So I put them in my Storm Swarm, so if you look at the Storm Swarm video, you'll see those frames if you want to see what they look like. And I'll put that link down in the video description here so you can look at that video. I mean, I liked them. They were covered in wax. The bees used them right away. I mean, I can't prove that small hive beetles don't hide in them or do, because I don't have small hive beetles. I have, I'm a failure when it comes to raising small hive beetles. But for those of you, if you use those Ceracell frames, I'm not buying more of them because they're expensive. They work really well. They're just expensive. And since I don't have small hive beetles, it's not a concern for me. The other thing is, when you're pushing your frames together, these upper areas for small hive beetles to hide, really not a lot of hiding space. These shoulders will go right together. The bees will seal up, because I've seen this in my observation hive with these style of frames, the acorn frames. The bees were filling these with propolis and wax on their own. And then sometimes they do already on their own make cells down these sides, because I looked at a lot of my frames to see if my own bees would make the cells here, and they do. So these are big enough for the bees, the workers, to actually have cells in here. So they do construct them and finish them out. So that kind of left the only real hiding spot could be down maybe along the bottom. So I think your small hive beetles, unless those of you who have high small hive beetle numbers in your hives, have you actually seen them hiding in these frames, or do they get up on your inner cover and things like that in the back of your hive? But for me, it's not a problem, so it didn't justify the expense of buying frames that were designed specifically to eliminate a problem that I don't have. But the bees did use them. The wax was good. They drew them out well, and I have no problems with it other than they're going to be expensive to buy. Number 13. This is from Peter in Virginia. Is steel a better queen excluder than plastic? Because people are buying equipment this time of year. To me personally, I think steel is better than plastic. And I'm just going to give you a quick rundown here. I had some bad experiences with plastic in the past. So these are queen excluders. What's the purpose of a queen excluder? To exclude your queen from any part of the hive that you don't want her to go to. And normally, that's your honey supers up above, brood box down here, queen excluder on top. Workers pass through and get to your honey supers, but the queen can't get up there, and that's why you don't get drones or worker larvae or eggs or anything else other than honey up in your honey super. But when you look at them, see these little squares, these little rectangles here? And what I want you to notice is we have to run, of course, look at all the support structure that has to go through here, horizontal and vertical. See all the cells there? And then so what I want you to see is look at how open the metal queen excluder is compared to this, right? And the other thing is the cells don't match up. And why is that? Because with the plastic, we need thicker supporting structure in the plastic to keep it from deforming and bending. With the metal, you don't need all of those intermediate supports. So that's good stuff. Now, this comes with metal edges or wooden edges. This wooden edge happens to be finished with Eco Wood finish that I put on them. But these are, when you look at them up close, they're better for the bees for another reason too. Here's a black one. When you look at all these cells up close, all these little openings, some of the edges are pretty sharp. So your bees don't pass through, the worker bees don't pass through these easily sometimes. They really have to push through them. So they're scraping the hair off of their bodies in some cases. They are working hard to get through, and I've found in the past, through direct observation, that many of your worker bees either can't get through them at all or just give up because it's such a struggle to get through. On the flip side of that, the plastic ones, this one just happens to be the one for flow hives. And this is just another one, but see how wavy they are and everything. But anyway, I've had bees actually glue these up and close them up with propolis and burr comb and almost completely eliminate your ability to pass through, where I've never had a metal one completely blocked up with propolis and beeswax. Another thing that I get to do is I can take a hot gun, a hot heat gun, and I can just melt the wax right out of this if I want to. And when it comes to the plastic ones, they tend to deform over time, but also, by the way, the metal one with just a metal trim instead of the wooden trim around it looks exactly like that one. The only difference is no metal trim. I mean, no wooden spacer there. So if I were picking one over the other, obviously there's a price difference, but if somebody were starting out and they want something that would last them basically forever, that the bees would have the easiest time getting through, and that they would not gum up completely, but if they did gum it up, it would be the easiest to clean off, although you can put these in the freezer, take them out, and you're supposed to be able to snap the wax off of them. But if I were telling somebody, personal preference, is one better than the other, I would prefer the metal ones over the plastic ones. So, thanks for that question. Bees have a hard time getting through. Some of them do. Question number 14, last one for the day. Finally, let me get some hot chocolate. This is from Mark in Salt Lake City, Utah. I was wondering if you can go over some of the basics of how bees survive and thrive in an observation hive. I think you've mentioned yours is in the unheated shed. How do they survive through winter with only 8 frames? What kind of unique care do you need to provide them as compared to your regular hives? How would you imagine your care would change if the hive was fully outdoors, such as under a covered patio or inside a heated building? I've noticed most observation hives come with some sort of wooden cover to protect them from the light. What kind of negative impacts have been demonstrated, if any, on a hive if left exposed to natural light? So there's a lot of questions here. A large observation hive is not in my immediate plans, but I'd like to get an idea of the possibilities in the future. Okay, the observation hive. They're terrible for bees. I'll just tell you that right now. 8 frames, so it's the equivalent of mine I bought from Banterra Bees. Those things are expensive. I paid $800 for a 4, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, for an 8 frame, so 8 deeps, 4 pairs of 2, swing view, and then I have R20 insulation on the front and the back of it, and then of course the perimeter of it is standard 2x4 material, so 1.5 inches thick of pine. I don't like them, and it's touch and go every single year whether or not you will even get them through winter. Now remember, it's an observation hive. It's supposed to be in a warm part of your house. So you're supposed to bring that thing in and mount it to your wall and then run an 1.5-inch diameter tube out through the sidewall of your house. So now you've got an entrance to and from your beehive that usually is where people walk, or it's under the soffit or something like that. But long story short, I am not a fan of 4 frames high, 8-frame observation hives for unheated spaces. Now the other thing is, and I'm going to talk about it in a second because I'm making changes, I'm making my own. I'm not going to buy them again. $800 buys a lot of materials, and those things come without the glass. So now you have to get the glass. So knowing what I know, having used them through several years, and it's a great advantage for the beekeeper who's studying bees, or if you're teaching bee biology and things like that, you want people to see it, then they're a terrific thing. And nature centers, like we have a nature center here in northwest Pennsylvania, Asbury Woods, and they have an observation hive in there. This is open to the public. They do have low light on it, but it is exposed for visitors all day long. I mean, what's the point of an observation hive if it's not being observed? Mine was kept in total darkness. So what I did was I shuttered the whole building. So in other words, during warm periods of the year, there were closed off windows. So it's a dark building because the building existed just for the observation hive. So in my Way to Bee Academy, which is in the planning stages still, thank you to those of you who are showing an interest in that. The Way to Bee Academy will have a minimum of 3 large observation hives. They are going to be, because here's the problem too with your observation hive in a building that doesn't have heat and resources, right? If you just have 2 frames together, the only place that they really have control over is between the 2 deep frames. So my plan is to have 3s. So we'll have triples. We'll have a center frame, and then we'll have a front and a back frame that's observed by people looking at the observation hive. So whatever's going on in that middle frame, we won't even see. We won't know about, and I don't consider that to be a big problem. So the other things, so now I'll have 3, 6, 9, 12. So we'll have the equivalent of 12 deep frames, but they'll be in a column, and instead of 2 frames deep with bee space on the outside of that, we'll go out even more, so now we have much deeper space. The other thing is, all the framing material is going to be well insulated. What else would I change? The feeder would not be directly on top center of the hive. I'm going to have a feeder slot that comes out to the side near the top, and I'll be able to change the feed and resources, but we'll have a very well insulated top because the Way to Bee Academy is not going to be a heated space. So it's seasonal, right? And so the observation hives that go in there will have their own insulation, so they'll be much larger, much thicker, better designed, better insulated, and be able to give us a look in on the bees. So we'll warm the space while we're observing the bees, and then when we're done, we'll of course cool down the space after insulation is restored to the beehives. But I'm custom building them. I'm not doing observations anymore purchased through a company like that. They're super expensive. They come without glass. By the way, if you're putting in glass on your observation hive, here's what I recommend. I bought the best quality plexiglass I could find. Huge mistake. Next time we'll be using tempered safety glass for all of the hives, and they'll be double paned. So that's the other thing that we're going to fix, because now I can clean actual tempered glass and things like that. So that's the last question of the day there. So I want to thank you for being here today. If you have questions of your own that you want to submit, you can go to fredsfinefowl.com or thewaytobee.org, and you can fill out, there's the Way to Bee page, and there's a form there that you can fill out. Some people send me comments anonymously, and so you're allowed to do that. You don't have to, your name doesn't have to be included. If you'd like to introduce yourself to me, but you don't want me to mention your name during a video, that's all perfectly fine. And I want to thank you for being here today. I hope that your colonies are ready for winter. For those of you who are down in the southern hemisphere, I'm glad that you're enjoying summer and everything else, and things are going great. So we enjoy hearing from you too. The next thing you're going to hear from me will be letting you know the schedule for the next upcoming live chat. I'll try to give you as much advance notice as I can, but that's it for today. Thanks for being here. I hope you learned something, and many thanks to those of you who sent in your questions.